The void did not simply shake, it screamed. It was a sound beyond sound, a frequency that shattered the laws of physics governing the 12 universes. Goku, the anomaly, the being who had defied angels and shattered the Grand Priest's domain, had done the unthinkable. He had not merely touched the divine, he had consumed it. The 7th Super Dragon Ball, a construct the size of a planet compressed by the impossible density of his will, vanished down his throat. Silence followed, but it was the silence of a star moments before it goes supernova. Inside the Saiyan's body, reality was being rewritten. The immense, wish-granting radiation of the Super Dragon Balls was not meant for biological containment. His skin, once covered in the rugged red scales of the primal dragon, began to fracture. Beams of blinding, multicolored light pierced through the cracks in his flesh, turning him into a living constellation of agony. He was no longer a warrior, he was a walking singularity, a bomb composed of absolute magic threatening to wipe existence clean. High above Zalama, the dragon god creator, watched with eyes that held eons of wisdom and a sudden, heartbreaking resolve. The vessel was strong, but the power was infinite. Without a soul capable of governing eternity, the Saiyan would not become a king. He would become a cataclysm. To witness the birth of the Platinum Dragon King and the ultimate sacrifice that forged him, anchor your soul to this timeline. Subscribe now, and let the legend of the true dragon god unfold before your eyes. The act was done. The throat burned, not with the heat of fire, but with the friction of a collapsing galaxy. Goku had not merely swallowed power, he had ingested the very concept of possibility. The 7 Super Dragon Balls, shrunk by the desperate compression of his will, now sat within the furnace of his stomach, no longer distinct orbs, but a singular, churning singularity of magic. For a heartbeat, there was silence in the forbidden realm. A pause so profound it felt as though the multiverse itself had held its breath, waiting to see if the laws of existence would hold. They did not. The scream did not begin in Goku's lungs. It began in the fabric of space around him. The air twisted, buckling under a sudden, impossible gravitational crushing weight. Goku's body, currently clad in the rough, jagged crimson scales of the red dragon god, stiffened. He floated in the void, arms outstretched, his head thrown back, as his pupils, vertical reptilian slits, dilated until the crimson iris was swallowed by an abyss of black. Then the light came. It did not glow from his skin. It tore through it. A beam of blinding prismatic radiance erupted from the center of his chest, shattering the red scales like cheap ceramic. Then another from his shoulder, another from his thigh. The containment vessel of his mortal biology was failing. The energy of the Super Dragon Balls was never meant to be contained within a living host. It was the power to rewrite reality, to erase universes, to grant the impossible. Now that infinite potential was raging against the finite cage of Saiyan flesh. Goku tried to move, to clench his fists and force the energy down as he had done with the Kaioken or the God forms, but his nervous system was no longer his own. He was not feeling pain. Pain is a warning signal for the living, and Goku was rapidly transcending the biological definition of life. He was feeling unmaking. Every cell in his body was being destroyed and recreated 1 trillion times a second. He felt his bones turning into stardust, his blood turning into liquid mana, and then snapping back into flesh, only to be destroyed again. It was a cycle of agony that stretched seconds into eons. The red dragon scales, which had allowed him to slaughter the lower angels, began to liquefy. They dripped from his body like molten wax, sizzling as they vanished into the void. Beneath the melting armor, his skin was translucent, glowing with the terrifying golden pulse of the super dragon. Inside him, the 7 stars of the balls swirled like a chaotic constellation, spinning faster and faster, generating a centrifugal force that threatened to rip his spirit from his body. He could hear them, not voices, but wishes. The energy of the Super Dragon Balls was not silent. It carried the echoes of every desire it had ever granted or could ever grant. Goku heard the birth of galaxies, the death of gods, the rewriting of timelines. The noise was deafening, a cacophony of absolute power that drowned out his own thoughts. He tried to think of Chi-Chi, of Vegeta, of the Earth he wanted to protect, but those memories were being washed away by the tidal wave of cosmic noise. His identity, the Saiyan named Son Goku, was being eroded, grain by grain, like a sandcastle facing a hurricane. The space around him began to warp grotesquely. The sheer density of the magic inside him was bending light, creating a halo of distorted reality. Colors that the human eye could not perceive rippled outward, turning the darkness of the void into a nauseating kaleidoscope of violent violet and burning gold. The ground of the Forbidden Realm cracked, huge chunks of ancient rock floating upward, defying gravity, drawn toward the living black hole that Goku was becoming. Zalama, the creator, stood miles away, yet the wind of Goku's dissolution whipped against his ancient robes. He watched with eyes that had seen the birth of the original timeline, unblinking and sorrowful. He saw what Goku could not. The Saiyan was not transforming, he was detonating. The energy was too wild, too ancient. It lacked a lattice, a structure to give it shape. The red dragon form was a beast of rage, but this required a king, and a king required order. Goku's jaw unhinged, a silent roar tearing from his throat. A pillar of golden light erupted from his mouth, piercing the dark sky of the realm. His body arched, his spine snapping audibly before fusing back together. The red aura that had defined his rebellion against the angels flickered and died, extinguished by the overwhelming heavy pressure of the dragon god's magic. He was becoming a star that would burn bright for one glorious, terrible second before exploding with enough force to wipe the Forbidden Realm and perhaps the entirety of Universe 7 off the map. The light consumed him entirely. For a moment there was no Goku. There was only a silhouette of a man suspended in the heart of a nuclear reaction, a shadow disintegrating into the light. The breakdown was absolute. The vessel had shattered. Zalama did not flinch as the shockwave hit him. It was a wall of pure force, a mixture of heat and spiritual pressure that would have vaporized a Supreme Kai or crushed a god of destruction into paste. But Zalama was neither. He was an absolute constant in a universe of variables. He stood rooted in the vacuum of the Forbidden Realm, his long flowing robes rippling violently as the prismatic storm raged around the epicenter that was once Son Goku. He narrowed his eyes that held the vertical slit pupils of the primordial lineage, glowing with a soft amber wisdom. "Foolish," Zalama whispered, his voice low but carrying an impossible weight that cut through the roaring wind. "Brave, but foolish." He had created the Super Dragon Balls eons ago, not as a weapon, but as a test. They were the ultimate temptation. To gather them was a feat, to use them was a privilege, but to consume them? To take the raw, unfiltered source code of reality and stuff it into a biological casing evolved from apes? It was madness. It was an insult to the delicate balance of the cosmos, and yet watching the silhouette of the Saiyan convulsing within the column of golden light, Zalama felt a stir in his chest that he had not felt since the dawn of time. He felt respect. For millions of years, Zalama had watched the multiverse from the shadows. He had seen the Xenos play their games, erasing universes like children kicking over sandcastles. He had seen the angels maintain their cold, detached neutrality, serving whoever sat on the throne, regardless of their morality. He had seen the stagnation of the divine hierarchy. The gods had become complacent, arrogant, and untouchable. But this mortal, this Goku, Zalama's gaze pierced through the blinding light, observing the spiritual anatomy of the dying Saiyan. He saw the cracks in Goku's soul, the fractures caused by loss, by betrayal, by the crushing weight of the Grand Priest's judgment. But he also saw something else. Holding the shattering pieces together was not magic, nor divine ki. It was sheer, stubborn will. Goku was not screaming in pain anymore. He was screaming in defiance. Even as his atoms were being ripped apart, his spirit was clawing at the energy, trying to wrestle the infinite dragon power into submission. He was trying to tame a tsunami with his bare hands. "You seek to challenge the omnipotence," Zalama mused, stepping forward. The ground beneath his feet transmuted into gold where he walked, reacting to his divine presence. "You seek to overthrow a system that has decided you are obsolete. You wish to be the shield for those who cannot fight." The light around Goku intensified, turning from gold to a terrifying, unstable white. The dimension began to groan. Cracks appeared in the sky of the Forbidden Realm, jagged black fissures leaking the nothingness of the void. The containment was failing. If Goku detonated now, the release of energy would trigger a chain reaction. The Super Dragon Balls would return to the cosmos, but the explosion would shatter the walls between dimensions. The angels would descend. The Grand Priest would erase the remnants. The rebellion would end before it truly began. Zalama stopped. He was now at the edge of the storm. The heat was intense enough to burn through the concept of temperature itself. He looked at his hands, hands that had sculpted stars and woven the fabric of the Super Shenron. He had lived for an eternity. He had seen everything there was to see. He had existed as a myth, a shadow, a neutral party. But neutrality, he realized, was just another form of cowardice when the order of the world was fundamentally unjust. Zalama closed his eyes. He thought of the Grand Priest's cold smile. He thought of Zeno's blank, terrifying innocence as he erased trillions of lives. "The multiverse does not need another destroyer," Zalama said to the roaring chaos. "It has enough of them. What it needs is a king." He opened his eyes. The amber glow within them intensified, burning with a new resolve. He would not let this fire burn out. He would not let this potential be wasted. The Super Dragon Balls were his creation, his children. They were wild and chaotic because he had made them that way. They lacked a conscience. They lacked a directive. But Goku had the conscience. He had the directive. He just lacked the capacity. "You have the fire, son Goku," Zalama spoke, raising his hands. The storm seemed to dampen slightly, reacting to its master. But fire without a hearth burns down the house. You need a vessel. You need a limit. Zalama took a deep breath, inhaling the chaotic mana of the dying universe. He knew what he had to do. It was forbidden by every law of the gods, a taboo greater than mortals interfering with time. A creator must never merge with his creation. But the old laws were written by the victors, and Zalama was tired of the old laws. He took another step. Entering the blinding white pillar, his form began to glow, not with the aggressive light of the Saiyan, but with a soft, enduring silver brilliance. "I've watched long enough," the dragon god whispered. "Let us see what a mortal can do with the soul of a creator." The center of the maelstrom was not loud. It was silent. A vacuum of absolute stillness where the pressure was so intense that sound waves were crushed before they could exist. Goku floated there, suspended in a crucifix of agony. His body was a ruin. The red scales were gone, leaving patches of raw, glowing flesh that constantly tried to knit together only to be torn apart again. His eyes were rolled back, white and blind, seeing nothing but the infinite chaotic swirl of the dragon energy. His consciousness was a flickering candle in a hurricane. He didn't know who he was anymore. Was he a Saiyan? Was he a dragon? Was he dead? "Let go," the power whispered. "Become everything. Become nothing." It was seductive. To stop fighting. To dissolve into the energy and become part of the universe's background radiation. No more pain. No more Grand Priest. No more failure. "Stand up." The voice did not come from his ears. It resonated directly in his core, vibrating against the marrow of his bones. Goku's blind eyes twitched. The command was gentle, but it carried the weight of a collapsing star. Through the blinding white haze, a figure emerged. It walked through the destructive energy as if strolling through a spring rain. Zalama stood before him. The ancient god was no longer shielded by robes or mystery. He was radiant. His body composed of shifting silver light, his physical form beginning to blur at the edges. He looked at Goku not with pity, but with the demanding expectation of a master looking at his final student. Zalama. Goku's thought was a jagged, broken transmission. "You are leaking," Zalama said softly, reaching out. His hand, cool and solid, touched Goku's burning chest. The contact sent a shockwave through Goku's system, momentarily stunning the chaotic energy. "You consumed the power of wishes, but you forgot that a wish requires intent. Chaos cannot defeat order, Goku. The Grand Priest is order. To defeat him, you must be something greater than chaos. You must be purpose." Goku tried to speak, but only a gurgle of golden light escaped his lips. He was drowning. "My children," Zalama continued, looking at the 7 swirling stars inside Goku's chest with a melancholy smile. "They are wild. They are infinite. They are eating you because they do not recognize you as their master. To them, you are just a container, a cage." Zalama moved closer, his face inches from Goku's. The heat was melting the god's projection, but he didn't care. "I cannot remove them. If I do, you will die. If I leave them, you will detonate." Zalama's eyes locked onto Goku's blank white stare. "There is only one path left, a path that ends me and begins you." Goku's survival instinct flared. He sensed the finality in Zalama's aura. He tried to shake his head, a weak, trembling motion. "No, don't. Do not mourn me, Saiyan," Zalama chuckled, a sound like grinding stones. "I have existed since before the stars were named. I am tired of watching. I am tired of the silence." Zalama placed both hands on Goku's shoulders. The grip was iron. "The Super Dragon Balls provide the power. You provide the will, but you lack the structure to hold it all together. You need a soul that understands eternity to act as the bridge." Zalama's body began to dissolve. It wasn't fading, it was flowing. Streams of silver liquid light poured from his eyes, his mouth, his fingertips. They didn't fall to the ground. They defied gravity, snake-like, winding their way toward Goku. They wrapped around the Saiyan's limbs, cooling the burning flesh, seeping into the pores. "I give you my essence," Zalama's voice echoed, now coming from everywhere at once. "I give you my history, my knowledge, my authority over the Dragon Clan. I will be the chains that bind the power. I will be the wall that holds back the flood." Goku gasped as the silver light pierced his chest. It didn't hurt. It felt ancient. It felt like coming home. The chaotic screaming noise of the wishes suddenly dampened. The wild energy was being corralled, disciplined, forced into lines and patterns. The 7 stars inside him stopped spinning erratically. They aligned. One by one, they locked into place along his spine, magnetized by the introduction of Zalama's soul. "Listen to me, Son Goku." Zalama's voice was fading, growing transparent. The red dragon was a beast of rage. That is gone. You must be more than rage now. You must be the law. You must be the king. The last of Zalama's physical form disintegrated, turning into a fine glittering dust that was inhaled into Goku's lungs. "Rule them," the whisper faded into the void. "Rule them all." For a second, Goku hung limp in the air. The golden light died down. The white heat evaporated. Darkness returned to the forbidden realm. Then a heartbeat. Thump, thump. It was loud, it was heavy. It sounded like a hammer striking an anvil. Thump, thump. Goku's head snapped up. The white blindness in his eyes cleared, replaced by a sudden sharp clarity. The vertical pupils returned, but they were no longer crimson. They were silver. The explosion never came. Instead, implosion. The atmosphere of the forbidden realm, superheated and charged with divine static, suddenly rushed inward. It was as if a hole had been punched in the bottom of the universe and all matter was draining into it. The focal point was Goku, but he was no longer visible. Where the Saiyan had floated, a shell had formed. It began as a thin layer of metallic liquid oozing from his pores, a byproduct of Zalama's soul merging with the biological carbon of the Saiyan body. It coated him completely, sealing his eyes, his mouth, his hands into a seamless, featureless sarcophagus. It hardened instantly. A perfect, smooth egg of metal floated in the void. It wasn't gold, and it wasn't silver. It was platinum. A metal that didn't just reflect light, it seemed to trap it. The surface was flawless, mirroring the distorted stars of the Forbidden Realm with terrifying clarity. Inside the chrysalis, biology was being rewritten. Goku was conscious, but he was not awake. He was floating in a deep, warm ocean of memory. He saw images that weren't his. He saw the birth of the first stars. He saw the Super Dragon Balls being carved from the bedrock of reality. He felt the loneliness of a creator who could only watch, never interfere. These were Zalama's memories, now etched into his own DNA. The rage. It's quiet, Goku thought, his mind drifting in the liquid metal darkness. The red dragon form had been a furnace, fueled by anger, by the desperate need to destroy those who hurt him. It was powerful, but it was exhausting. It burned him as much as it burned his enemies. This was different. The energy flowing through his veins now was cold. It was heavy. It didn't buzz or vibrate. It flowed with the relentless, unstoppable pressure of a glacier. The 7 Super Dragon Balls were no longer foreign objects in his stomach. They had dissolved, their essence fusing with his 7 chakras. Base, heart, throat, crown. He could feel them locking into place. The limiter that Zalama had sacrificed himself to create was working. It was a divine dam holding back the ocean of infinite power, allowing only what Goku could handle to flow through. Outside, the chrysalis began to change. Strange, intricate glyphs, the language of the gods, burned themselves onto the surface of the platinum egg. They glowed with a pale, ghostly blue light. The air around the egg began to freeze, not just cold, but absolute zero. The heat of the previous transformation was replaced by a chill that stopped atoms in their tracks. Frost crept across the floating rocks of the Forbidden Realm. The very concept of entropy was being paused. Crack. A hairline fracture appeared on the surface of the egg. It wasn't a jagged break. It was a straight, precise line, glowing white. Then another, and another. Geometric patterns forming a perfect symmetry. From within the shell, a sound began to emanate. It was a low, resonant hum like the chanting of monks in a vast cathedral. It grew louder, vibrating the fabric of space. In the angel realm, far across the multiverse, the Grand Priest paused mid-sentence. He looked down at his staff. The orb at the top was vibrating. A hairline crack appeared on the glass. For the first time in millennia, the Grand Priest frowned. Back in the Forbidden Realm, the humming reached a crescendo. The glyphs on the chrysalis flared with blinding intensity. The platinum was no longer just metal. It was alive. Crack. A piece of the shell fell away, tumbling into the void. It didn't drift. It plummeted, heavier than a neutron star. A hand emerged. It was not the claw of a beast. It was a hand armored in sleek, segmented plating that looked organic, as if the metal had grown from the bone. The fingers were long, elegant, tipped with sharp, crystalline talons. The palm glowed with a soft, rotary light. The hand gripped the edge of the broken shell. With a motion that looked effortless, it crushed the platinum wall. The chrysalis shattered. It didn't explode outward. It turned to dust, sparkling like diamond rain. And there he stood. The red dragon was gone. The monster was dead. The figure that floated in the diamond dust was regal. He was clad in natural armor, scales of liquid platinum that hugged his musculature like a second skin. The armor was segmented, allowing for perfect movement, covering his chest, his forearms, his shins. Between the plates, a faint, rhythmic blue light pulsed, the heartbeat of the dragon god. His hair was no longer the wild, spiked mane of the Super Saiyan. It was longer, flowing down his back like a river of silver mercury, defying gravity, shimmering with an inner light. Two long, sleek horns swept back from his temples, framing a face that was terrifyingly calm. He opened his eyes. The sclera was black, the void of space. The irises were platinum rings. The pupils were vertical slits of pure white light. He didn't roar, he didn't scream, he simply exhaled. A cloud of white mist escaped his lips, freezing the air instantly. The Platinum Dragon King had been born, and the silence he brought was heavier than any scream. The first thing the universe felt was the weight. It was not a physical heaviness, but a spiritual one. It was the sensation of a sudden, absolute authority entering a room that had been lawless for too long. The chaotic winds of the Forbidden Realm, which had howled for eons, died instantly. The floating debris of ancient planets stopped spinning, locking into place as if held by invisible hands. Gravity itself seemed to bow, reorienting its center not toward the core of the dimension, but toward the man standing in the void. Goku floated, his feet resting on nothing but the terrified fabric of space-time. He raised a hand, turning it slowly. The platinum scales that encased his forearm caught the dim light of distant stars, refracting it into a spectrum of cold blues and silvers. He clenched his fist. There was no strain, no resistance. The air inside his palm collapsed, a tiny sonic boom that sounded like a cracking whip in the silence. He felt heavy, but it was a good heaviness. The red dragon had felt like a fire burning out of control, a frantic race against his own stamina. This form felt like a mountain. It felt like the ocean floor. It was deep, crushing, and eternal. Zalama, Goku thought, the name echoing in the vast cathedral of his new mind. I am here. A presence hummed in his blood. It wasn't a voice, it was a feeling of ancient stability, a keel keeping the ship steady in a storm. The power is yours, Son Goku. The will is yours. I am merely the anchor. Goku closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. As he breathed in, the ambient energy of the Forbidden Realm, the leftover radiation of his transformation, was sucked into his nose. As he breathed out, a pulse of white energy rippled outward, washing over the jagged rocks of the realm. Wherever the energy touched, the destruction reversed. Cracks in reality sealed. Dust reformed into stone. Chaos was rewritten into order. He was no longer just a destroyer, he was a sovereign. I see it now, Goku whispered. His voice had changed. The gravelly, battle-worn tone of the Saiyan was gone, smoothed over by a metallic, resonant timbre. It sounded like a sword being drawn from a sheath. I see the strings. With his new eyes, the platinum dragon eyes, he looked beyond the physical. He saw the structure of the multiverse. He saw the 12 universes hanging like ornaments on the great tree of existence. He saw the timeline flowing like a river. And he saw the rot. He saw the angels high above in their realm drinking tea while mortals burned. He saw the Xenos playing games with lives they didn't understand. He saw the Grand Priest, a beacon of cold, blue light, sitting at the top of the pyramid, convinced of his own untouchability. A cold rage simmered in Goku's chest, but it did not boil over. The platinum armor kept it contained, focusing it into a laser point of intent. Grand Priest? Goku spoke the name, and the syllables seemed to cut the air. He didn't power up. He didn't squat and scream to draw out his Kai. He simply willed it. Boom. A pillar of platinum aura shot up around him. It wasn't jagged or wild. It was a perfect cylinder of light, calm and silent, rising infinitely upward, piercing the roof of the Forbidden Realm, piercing the boundary of Universe 7 and shooting straight into the neutral zone. The shaking stopped. The multiverse stabilized, but every being with a sense of Kai felt it. On Beerus's planet, the oracle fish dropped its staff, trembling uncontrollably. In the time nest, the scrolls of history stopped rewriting themselves, freezing in ink. In the angel realm, the Grand Priest stood up from his throne, his expression finally shifting from arrogance to genuine concern. Goku lowered his hand. The aura faded, leaving only a soft, holy glow around his platinum form. He looked at the space where the dimensional wall separated him from the angel realm. It was supposed to be impenetrable, a barrier that only angels could cross. Goku extended one finger. The tip of the platinum claw glowed. He traced a line in the air. The fabric of reality unzipped. A portal opened, revealing the blinding white clouds of the divine palace on the other side. "You wanted to erase me," Goku said to the empty void, his voice carrying the finality of a death sentence. "You wanted to judge a mortal." He stepped forward, his platinum foot landing on the invisible threshold of the angel realm. "Now," the Dragon King whispered, his eyes narrowing into glowing slits, "it is my turn to judge you." The screen fades to black as the Platinum Dragon King steps through the rift, leaving the mortal world behind.